Ullah went to the Port Authority yesterday morning with a purpose. He had strapped to his body an IED, a pipe bomb that he had made using a metal pipe filled with metal screws, held together under his jacket with wires and zip ties. Ullah admitted that he began researching how to build bombs about a year ago and had been planning this particular attack for several weeks.
The failed suicide bomber Aqayed Ullah charged today with 5 federal terrorism charges ranging from providing material support to a terror group to using a weapon of mass destruction. He faces life in prison. Here's what we know about Ullah. He's a 27-year-old Bangladeshi national. He entered the United States on an immigrant visa in 2011. He got that family visa through a relative who got here through the diversity lottery program. Now, 2/3 of immigrants come here via family visa programs, 9.3 million from 2005 to 2015. The National Review says, quote, people are getting into the U.S. with no investment in this country, its systems of beliefs or its institutions. That's usually necessary. It's not even support you're seeing for the U.S.'s economic success. That's not even a prerequisite for admission. The only tie, an admission requirement, is one of blood, meaning family ties. President Trump today vowing to end these immigration programs. Roll tape.
There have now been 2 terrorist attacks in New York City in recent weeks carried out by foreign nationals here on green cards. The first attacker came through the visa lottery, and the second through chain migration. We're going to end both of them.
Joining me now, he's former senior advisor to UK Prime Minister David Cameron. He is the host of the blockbuster show, The Next Revolution with Steve Hilton. He is Steve Hilton. Good to see you, Steve. Senator Tom Cotton asked on the floor of the Senate last week, quote, shouldn't we have an immigration system that focuses on the needs of American workers and the U.S. economy, not one that gives out green cards by random chance? Is it time to end these programs?
He's exactly right. It absolutely is time to end it. There's no popular support for it. There's political support for it from the Democrats, who have always been, for the last few years, pushing this argument that any kind of restriction on immigration is somehow racist. That's, of course, ridiculous. You can be pro-immigration, understand the benefits of people coming here who've got something to offer, who can contribute to our economy and our society, but to have still very tight controls. We don't have tight controls. All these systems are completely broken. Now, what I don't understand is why it's taking so long to do something about it when you've got a president who is elected so clearly with immigration as part of his message that got him elected, and you've got a Republican control of Congress. I mean, I spoke to Senator David Perdue, who with Tom Cotton has put forward a very sensible bill which would, amongst other things, deal with these really broken systems. I think it's really time to get on with it. This should be the next priority the minute they're done with the tax bill.
Yeah, isn't the proof staring us in the face when you see people trying to kill innocent people on their way to work? I mean, there's no other greater violation of human rights than that. And also sanctuary cities, you see criminal illegals coming in killing people. I mean, you're talking about the bill that would abolish the chain migration and the visa lottery and limit family immigration only to spouses and minors, children under the age of 18, more skills-based immigration like they have in Canada and Australia. But do you think this is too little too late? I think you've said the U.S. doesn't take these kinds of attacks seriously enough. Can you explain?
Well, I think it's also true to say that dealing with immigration is just one part of it. That can help us deal with the threat from new people, as it were, coming into America, but it doesn't help us with the other part of this terror threat, which is the radicalization of people who actually maybe when they came to America, or even who were born here, they weren't the kind of people who'd ever do this, but through online resources, through meeting people at mosques, through all sorts of different means, become convinced that this murderous Islamist ideology is the right way to live their life. Now, that's something we need to fight again, and I don't think we're taking that seriously enough here. There's so much more that we could do to stop the online spread of that kind of hate, but also looking at the religion of Islam as well. It's true to say that most Muslims are peace-loving. All that stuff is completely true, but I do think we need to expect more. Also, we need to expect more from the country, frankly, that did most to spread all this hate and this Islamist terror ideology. That is Saudi Arabia. They funded all these radicalized preachers and the mosques where they do their dirty work. And now they say they're reforming their country. Well, I think what we could also expect from them is a lot of money put into communities to build up an alternative network of mosques and Islamic centers that will provide a positive alternative to this disgusting ideology.
But the U.S. doesn't vet on ideology, right?
Yeah, but that's right. But I'm talking about the people who are already here.
Yeah.
Because that's also a risk. It's not just the immigration. The immigration has to be done. That's, for example, on immigration. That should be part of it, the ideological inclinations of people. That's what I thought the president meant when he spoke about extreme vetting. That should include any history that people might have of participating in that kind of conversation, that kind of ideological conversation. So yes, we need to look at that as well. But it's also about people who are already here. It's too late to shut the door. They may have been born here, and we need to do something about that as well.
What was your reaction on the news that the family of the failed suicide bomber at the Port Authority, that the family was outraged by the way that they were treated by police investigators, saying a teenage relative was basically pulled out of class for questioning, things like that. What was your reaction to that?
It's just completely absurd. I mean, the first duty of the police and the security services is to protect people. And every time there's an incident like this, quite rightly, the alarm bells goes off and say, well, is this just one, is it a one-off? Or is there something about this person that can tell us whether there are future attacks that we need to know about right away, where literally every second counts in terms of potentially stopping further injury or loss of life? So, of course, the police have to respond sometimes in very speedy and aggressive ways. That's their job.
Steve Hilton, we love having you on. Come back soon.